Steel is one of the most ubiquitous materials in global construction. Its production is a major pollutant, and it accounts for up to 7% of global carbon emissions. However, in the UK, its reuse is becoming an increasingly marginal practice. So in the last 15 years, the amount recovered from demolition sites and reused structurally has decreased from 11 to 6%, which is a surprising fact, because apart from a few minor exceptions, structural steel does not degrade with use. So miraculously, the agricultural sector is now one of the last vestiges of this reuse practice that remains. So it offers us a pertinent case study when looking at the reuse of structural steel and the wider reuse industry in the UK. So what can we learn from the resilience of this specific niche economy? Farmers are subject to specific regulation with regards to what they can build on their land. So this peculiar long-standing condition has given an embattled reuse practice space to breathe. So building regulations, fabrication standards and planning legislation all show considerable leniency towards the industry, and is a major factor as to a farmer's ability to work structurally with reclaimed building materials. So these exceptional regulatory circumstances are complementary as well to an embedded and ubiquitous culture of reuse within farming that often is so common that it receives very little documentation. So for example here, through very recent magazines or farmers' guides, you see for sale these steel portal frames, reused steel within the classified adverts. So the use of the demountable steel portal frame reflects a reuse practice rooted in agricultural history. So for example, English barns from the 13th century onwards, where the form and structure of the kit of parts timber building is similar to the steel portal frame. So you see from this section here the two main construction methods, where you have welding and bolting. So the architecture of these portal frames also responds to the material, where the steel allows for long distance spans without the use of overhead trusses or vertical columns impairing on the functionality of the interior space. So the result is this building that's unspecific and adaptable enough to cope with changing agricultural practice, using a direct enough construction method that limits the amount of necessary specialist building processes needed. For example, many of these buildings are bolted together, and so they're prefabricated and they're bolted together on site. So you can see here, very simple connection which would connect at the eave to the rafter of one of these portal frames. So in other words, they are a typology that has been developed with ease of construction, demountability and reuse in mind. Within this niche, there are problems. So the widespread confusion exists about the status of material resellers in relation to European manufacturing standards. So with CE marking, for example, resellers are anxious about their legal obligations to conform. And high labour costs mean that the salvage of any building below 460 square metres is often not economically viable. So heavily compressed demolition programmes and existing health and safety laws tend to limit the amount of careful deconstruction and subsequent salvage that can take place. So even after steel elements are recovered, there are limited facilities for their preparation and long-term storage, which is another thing that disincentivises the practice. So counterintuitively, a high price for new steel has been shown to reduce reuse rates by encouraging this usable second-hand material to be sold off as lucrative scrap. So the average turnaround for reused elements in a steel stockist yard is counted in months and years, as opposed to as little as 48 hours for new elements. So this slow turnaround discourages widespread change to the reuse steel industry and reduces market expansion or investment. So as it is now, the slow, non-liquid asset of reused steel is an outsider. So this current market position is not out of choice. but rather being considered a hindrance? Can this outsider status provide reused steel with an opportunity? Can inherent slowness in fact become an asset that is about offering stability over a ruthless expansion, growth or profit? So the case of agricultural communities in the UK demonstrates that aided by appropriate regulation or clarity, a market for second-hand steel is and would be possible. So it could, well, as an economic or economy shielded from the more consumptive forces of capitalism, can we acknowledge this niche situation and capitalise on it?